There are stories that weave themselves into the fabric of time, not merely as anecdotes, but as living entities, breathing with the breath of those who told them, and haunting with the whispers of those who were silenced. This isn't just a story. It's a chilling echo from the past, a cautionary tale that unfurls like a dark tapestry, thread by thread, revealing a truth far more terrifying than any fiction. Imagine a world where love, the most beautiful and purest of human emotions, becomes the very conduit for an ancient, malevolent force. A world where the symbol of eternal commitment, a wedding ring, transforms into an instrument of unspeakable horror. This is the world we're about to step into, a world where every bride, bound by love and a glittering band of gold, met the same grim fate. Our journey begins not in a forgotten crypt or a haunted mansion, but in the heart of a vibrant, bustling city, the kind where dreams are forged and futures are built. Yet, even in the brightest of lights, shadows can linger, deep and unseen. Sarah, a woman whose spirit radiated warmth and optimism, found herself swept up in a whirlwind romance with David. He was everything she had ever dreamed of: charismatic, kind, and possessed of a gentle strength that made her feel utterly safe. Their love story unfolded like a classic novel, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and an undeniable connection that seemed destined to last a lifetime. From the moment they met at a local art gallery, a spark ignited, and within months, their lives were inextricably intertwined. They spent countless evenings lost in conversation, discovering shared passions for literature, hiking, and late-night stargazing. David's eyes, a deep shade of blue, held a kindness that instantly drew Sarah in, and his easy smile could light up even the darkest room. He spoke of a future filled with adventure, of building a home, and of growing old together, and Sarah, mesmerized by his vision, found herself falling deeper in love with every passing day. Their friends often remarked on their undeniable chemistry, a perfect blend of shared values and complementary personalities. Sarah, always practical and grounded, found herself delightfully challenged by David's spontaneous spirit, while he, in turn, found solace in her quiet strength. It was a love that felt natural, effortless, and utterly right. The proposal came on a crisp autumn evening, under a canopy of twinkling stars, at the very spot where they'd had their first picnic. David, his voice thick with emotion, knelt and presented a ring, not a traditional diamond solitaire, but a unique piece, crafted from aged gold, intricately carved with symbols that seemed to whisper tales of a bygone era. It was beautiful, undeniably so, with a large, oval-shaped sapphire at its center, surrounded by smaller, almost black diamonds that shimmered with an eerie, captivating light. Sarah gasped, tears welling in her eyes. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a true antique, rich with history. David explained it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations of his lineage, always given to the bride on their wedding day. "It's been in my family for centuries, Sarah," he had said, his voice laced with reverence. "A symbol of enduring love, passed from one generation to the next. Now it's yours." Sarah, overwhelmed with joy, slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a surprisingly snug embrace that felt both comforting and, oddly, a little chilling. A fleeting shiver ran down her spine, a sensation she quickly dismissed as pre-wedding jitters, or perhaps the cool evening air. The ring truly was magnificent, a conversation starter wherever she went. Its vintage charm and unusual design drew compliments from friends and strangers alike. But as the days turned into weeks, leading up to their highly anticipated wedding day, Sarah began to notice subtle shifts, unsettling occurrences that she initially attributed to stress or coincidence. Small things at first, a faint chill that seemed to emanate from the ring itself, even in a warm room. The way the sapphire, in certain lights, seemed to pulse with a faint, internal glow, almost like a living thing. Then there were the dreams, vivid, disturbing dreams that began to plague her sleep. They were fragmented at first, hazy images of shadowy figures, whispers she couldn't quite decipher, and an overwhelming sense of dread. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the image of a gaunt, pale face lingering at the edge of her memory, a face she couldn't place. These dreams became more frequent, more intense, leaving her exhausted and unsettled each morning. One afternoon, while browsed through an old book of folklore in a dusty antique shop, a small, faded illustration caught her eye. It depicted a wedding, but the bride, her face obscured by shadow, wore a ring strikingly similar to Sarah's. Below the illustration, the caption read, "The Cursed Binding of Eldoria." Sarah's blood ran cold. She quickly scanned the accompanying text, her eyes widening in disbelief. It spoke of an ancient family, a lineage of sorcerers and dark practitioners, who had crafted a powerful artifact, a ring imbued with both immense beauty and a terrible curse. The curse, it claimed, targeted the wearer, specifically the bride, siphoning their life force, twisting their love into despair, and ultimately, leading them to a tragic, untimely end. The details were vague, shrouded in myth and superstition, but the image of the ring, the chilling similarities, sent a tremor of fear through her. She tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as an old wives' tale, a morbid coincidence. But the coldness emanating from the ring on her finger seemed to intensify, a silent, ominous confirmation. She mentioned the unsettling dreams to David, trying to make light of them, chalking them up to wedding stress. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed with concern, but he quickly reassured her, attributing them to her natural anxieties about such a momentous occasion. "It's just nerves, my love," he had said, gently squeezing her hand. "Every bride gets them. Soon, we'll be married, and all these worries will melt away." His unwavering calm was both comforting and, strangely, a little unsettling. He seemed almost too nonchalant about the ring's origins, too quick to dismiss her concerns about the strange dreams. He never spoke much about his family history, often changing the subject when it came up, simply stating that they were a private people. Sarah, caught up in the intoxicating rush of impending marriage, allowed herself to be lulled into a false sense of security. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that her anxieties were unfounded, that the ring was just a beautiful antique, and that her dreams were merely a product of an overactive imagination. But the subtle shifts continued. Her usually vibrant energy began to wane. She found herself feeling inexplicably drained, even after a full night's sleep. Her skin, once glowing, took on a subtle pallor. Friends noticed, too, asking if she was feeling unwell, if the wedding planning was proving too much. Sarah would force a smile, dismissing their concerns. The weight of the ring on her finger seemed to grow heavier, a constant, chilling presence. One evening, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a shop window, and for a fleeting moment, she saw not her own reflection, but a shadowy, indistinct figure standing behind her, its eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. She spun around, but there was nothing there, just the bustling street, indifferent to her sudden fear. The whispers in her dreams grew louder, clearer, forming fragments of sentences she couldn't quite grasp. The binding, the price, they seemed to murmur, intertwined with the image of that same pale, gaunt face. She found herself subconsciously rubbing the sapphire on the ring, a nervous habit she hadn't realized she'd developed. It was as if the ring itself was drawing her deeper into its sinister embrace, tightening its grip, preparing her for something she couldn't yet comprehend. The closer the wedding day loomed, the more intense these premonitions became, a cold dread settling in the pit of her stomach. She knew, deep down, that something was terribly wrong. The ancient gold of the ring, once a symbol of enduring love, now felt like a cold, inescapable shackle. The beautiful sapphire, once so captivating, now seemed to stare back at her with an unsettling, knowing gaze. The love she shared with David, once a beacon of hope, now felt tainted, overshadowed by a growing, inexplicable fear. And as the final hours ticked away before she was to walk down the aisle, a chilling certainty began to take root in her mind. This wasn't just a ring. It was a promise of eternal love, yes, but also a silent, terrifying vow of a fate she was powerless to escape. The story was just beginning, and the darkness, lurking beneath the glittering facade of a happy wedding, was about to reveal its true, horrifying face. The wedding day dawned, bright and deceptively cheerful, a stark contrast to the growing unease that had settled deep within Sarah's heart. The church was adorned with fragrant white roses, the air filled with the joyful chatter of guests, and sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the aisle in a kaleidoscope of vibrant colors. Sarah, dressed in a breathtaking gown of silk and lace, looked every inch the radiant bride. Yet, beneath the veil, a flicker of apprehension danced in her eyes. The wedding ring, now firmly on her left hand, felt heavier than ever, a cold weight that seemed to pulse with an almost imperceptible energy. Every time she looked at it, the sapphire seemed to deepen in color, almost turning black in the shadows, and the intricate carvings felt sharper against her skin. As she walked down the aisle, her father's arm linked firmly in hers. She saw David waiting at the altar, his face alight with adoration. He looked undeniably handsome in his tailored suit, his blue eyes sparkling with a happiness that seemed almost too perfect. For a fleeting moment, the chilling premonitions receded, replaced by the intoxicating wave of love and anticipation. She reminded herself that this was her wedding day, the culmination of a beautiful romance, and that all her fears were simply irrational jitters. The whispers of old folklore and the shadowy figures from her dreams were just that, dreams. Or so she tried to convince herself. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly, filled with heartfelt vows and warm blessings. When David slipped the ring onto her finger during the exchange of rings, a jolt, cold and sharp, shot through Sarah's entire arm, a sensation she quickly masked with a smile. It was as if an invisible circuit had closed, sealing something profound and irreversible. From that moment on, the subtle changes she had noticed before the wedding began to accelerate, subtly at first, then with an alarming intensity. The dreams, once fragmented and hazy, grew clearer, more coherent, and undeniably terrifying. She found herself transported to a dilapidated, ancient manor, its walls crumbling, its air thick with the scent of decay. In these dreams, she was always a bride, always wearing that ring, but her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow with despair. She would witness brief, chilling vignettes. A woman collapsing at the altar, her breath seized by an unseen force. Another, her skin turning ashen, her fingers clawing at her throat. A third, screaming silently as a dark, swirling mist enveloped her. Each scene was a variation of the same gruesome end, and with each dream, a cold, dread certainty solidified within Sarah's mind. These were not mere nightmares. These were memories, or premonitions, or perhaps, something far more sinister, the echoed fates of those who had worn the cursed ring before her. The gaunt, pale face she'd seen at the edge of her memory now had a name, a different name in each dream, but always the same vacant, terror-stricken eyes. The whispers, too, grew distinct. The life, the soul, claimed. During the day, a profound exhaustion began to grip her, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could alleviate. Her once vibrant energy seemed to drain away, leaving her perpetually sluggish and weak. Her skin, which had always possessed a healthy glow, now appeared pale and translucent, almost ghostly. Her eyes, once bright and lively, were often bloodshot and sunken, shadowed by dark circles. David, though outwardly concerned, seemed strangely unperturbed by her deteriorating health. He would gently encourage her to rest, to eat more, but there was an underlying detachment in his demeanor, an almost clinical observation rather than genuine alarm. He would touch the ring on her finger, his thumb tracing the sapphire, and in those moments, Sarah felt an inexplicable chill, a sense of something cold and calculating behind his gaze. One afternoon, while browsed through old photo albums at David's family home, Sarah stumbled upon a collection of sepia-toned photographs. They were wedding photos, meticulously preserved, spanning generations. And in every single one, on the hand of every bride, was the ring. The same intricately carved gold, the same large sapphire, though in some, the stone seemed duller, almost lifeless, as if its brilliance had been slowly extinguished. But it wasn't just the ring that caught her attention. It was the brides themselves. In every photograph, their faces, though initially full of hope, seemed to possess a subtle, unsettling resemblance to the gaunt, terrified women from her dreams. Their eyes, even in the faded images, held a haunted quality, a flicker of sadness that belied the joyful occasion. And the chilling commonality? Every single one of these women, according to the small, handwritten notes on the back of the photos, had died young. Tragically, mysteriously. Some were described as wasting away from an unknown illness, others as succumbing to sudden, inexplicable accidents. One note simply read, "Lost to the binding." Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the album. The pieces of the terrifying puzzle were starting to click into place, forming a picture of unimaginable horror. The cursed ring wasn't just a superstition. It was a deadly heirloom, a silent executioner passed down through generations. And David knew. His calm demeanor, his quick dismissals of her fears, his insistence on the ring's significance. It all made a terrible, sickening sense. He wasn't just a loving husband. He was part of this macabre lineage, a silent participant in a chilling family ritual. She confronted him that evening, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and betrayal. "David," she began, holding up the photo album, her finger pointing at a faded image of a beautiful young woman, her face pale even in the photograph. "Tell me about this. Tell me about all of them. The ring. And what happened to them." David's face, usually so open and kind, hardened. A flicker of something cold, something ancient, passed through his eyes. He sighed, a slow, deliberate exhale, and for the first time, Sarah saw a hint of profound weariness, a deep-seated resignation in his usually vibrant demeanor. He walked over to the window, his back to her, and for a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the faint sounds of the city outside. Then he turned, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet laced with a chilling authority Sarah had never heard before. "Sarah," he began, his gaze unwavering. "There are things older than us, forces that bind families, destinies that are carved long before we draw our first breath. This ring, it is not merely an heirloom. It is a covenant." He spoke of his lineage, the Eldoria family, a name that echoed in Sarah's mind from the dusty folklore book. He spoke of an ancient pact, made centuries ago, to secure prosperity and power for their descendants. But every pact has a price, and the price for the Eldoria prosperity was a chilling one. The life force of their brides, offered as a continuous tribute to an unseen entity, a malevolent force that resided within the sapphire of the ring. Each bride, with her love and commitment, unknowingly renewed the binding, offering her soul, her vitality, to sustain the Eldoria line. David explained it dispassionately, almost academically, as if he were recounting a historical event rather than revealing a horrific family secret that now directly implicated her. He spoke of the curse not as something he could break, but as an inescapable reality, a fate that had been woven into the fabric of his family for generations. "My ancestors," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "believed it was a necessary sacrifice, a small price for enduring legacy. The ring, it simply facilitates the transfer. It draws the essence of life, the vitality, from the wearer, slowly, imperceptibly, until there is nothing left." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. It was worse than any nightmare. Her beloved David, the man she had promised to spend her life with, was not just a victim of this curse. He was its unwitting accomplice, a guardian of its terrible power. He had brought her into this knowingly, willingly. The love that had felt so pure, so real, now felt like a cruel deception, a bait-and-switch designed to lure her into a gilded cage. The world reeled around her. The happiness, the hope, the dreams of a shared future, all shattered into a million pieces, revealing a horrifying truth. The wedding ring, once a symbol of endless love, was a chain, binding her not to David, but to a slow, agonizing death. The chill radiating from it intensified, a silent, mocking laughter against her skin. And as David watched her, his blue eyes still holding that unsettling calm, Sarah realized that the trap had been set, and she, the unwitting bride, had just walked right into it. The story was far from over, but the unraveling had truly begun. The air in the room crackled with an unspeakable tension, a heavy silence broken only by the frantic pounding of Sarah's heart. The horrifying truth, laid bare by David's calm, almost clinical explanation, settled over her like a shroud. The man she loved, the man she had just married, was not only aware of the cursed ring's dark power but was an active, if resigned, participant in its continuation. The idyllic world they had built together crumbled, revealing a gaping abyss of betrayal and ancient malevolence. Sarah's initial shock morphed into a cold, searing rage. "You knew!" she whispered, her voice raw with disbelief. "You knew what this ring did. You knew what happened to them, and you still brought me into this." Her words were choked with a mixture of grief and utter disgust. How could the man who had looked at her with such tenderness, who had promised her a lifetime of happiness, be capable of such monstrous deception? The blue sapphire on her finger seemed to throb with a sinister light, as if mirroring the venomous truth that had just been unleashed. David finally met her gaze, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of something beyond cold detachment, a profound weariness, a deep-seated regret that seemed to emanate from the depths of his being. "It was never my choice, Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible, tinged with a despair that was almost as chilling as his earlier composure. "This curse, it's a lineage. We are born into it. From the moment I was old enough to understand, I knew that I, too, would one day have to take a bride, and that she, in turn, would become the next vessel. My father, his father, all of them, they tried to fight it, some of them, to find a way out. But the price of defying the binding is far greater. It's not just one life. It's the ruin of the entire line, the unraveling of everything the Eldoria name stands for. Disease, madness, a slow, agonizing decay for every descendant. I saw it happen to my great-aunt's family when her husband refused to take a bride. They withered away one by one. It was a choice between her and the fate of all of us." His confession, while offering a semblance of explanation, did little to soothe Sarah's terror. It merely painted a picture of a man trapped in a horrifying legacy, forced to perpetuate a monstrous act. "So, I'm just a sacrifice?" Sarah's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "A pawn in your family's twisted game for power and prosperity? My life, my very soul, slowly drained away for your legacy." The thought was unbearable. She had built a future, dreams of children, a home filled with love. Now, it was all reduced to a macabre offering on an ancient, unseen altar. As she spoke, a sharp, searing pain shot through her left hand, radiating from the ring. She cried out, clutching her hand, her eyes wide with fear. The sapphire pulsated, a deep, angry crimson, and Sarah could feel a cold, creeping numbness spreading from her fingers, slowly engulfing her arm. It was as if the ring, sensing her resistance, was accelerating its deadly work. The room seemed to grow colder, the light dimmer, and the whispers from her dreams became a deafening chorus, chanting her name, beckoning her into the eternal void. David rushed to her side, his face contorted with a mixture of fear and desperation. "No, Sarah, don't fight it," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Resistance only makes it worse. It demands acceptance. It feeds on despair. If you fight, it will consume you faster." He tried to pull the ring from her finger, but it seemed fused to her skin, glowing with an internal, malevolent heat. Sarah screamed, her body racked with a sudden, violent tremor. She felt her strength rapidly ebbing away, her vision blurring at the edges. The room began to spin, and the faces of David and her home faded into a distorted blur. In that moment of absolute terror and impending doom, a primal instinct for survival surged through Sarah. She wouldn't just wither away. She wouldn't be another nameless victim in this cursed lineage. The image of the gaunt, lifeless brides from her dreams flashed before her eyes, and a defiant spark ignited within her. There had to be a way. There had to be a flaw, a weakness in this ancient binding. She remembered the fragmented words from the folklore book, the cursed binding of Eldoria, and David's own words, "It demands acceptance." Perhaps that was the key. If it fed on despair, perhaps hope, or defiance, could starve it. With a surge of newfound resolve, even as her body weakened, Sarah focused on the ring, on the pulsating sapphire. She closed her eyes, not in resignation, but in concentration, pushing back against the encroaching coldness, against the whispers that promised oblivion. She remembered a small, almost insignificant detail from the dusty book, a single, faded diagram next to the warning about the curse. It showed not just the ring, but a small, almost invisible symbol carved on the inside of the band, a symbol that had been deliberately obscured, barely visible to the naked eye. It was a counterspell, a forgotten rune meant to sever the bond. It had been dismissed as mere superstition by the book's author, an ineffective charm. But what if it wasn't? What if it was the only hope? David, still trying to pry the ring off, watched in horror as Sarah's eyes, though dimmed, narrowed with fierce determination. Her lips moved, murmuring words he couldn't quite distinguish. He saw her thumb tracing the inner surface of the ring, a gesture he had never noticed before. The sapphire pulsed erratically, its crimson glow flickering, almost as if in distress. The cold aura around Sarah seemed to falter, then surge, then waver again. It was a desperate, internal battle, a clash of wills between an ancient, malevolent force and a single, determined human spirit. Just as the darkness threatened to consume her entirely, just as her breath hitched and her body sagged, Sarah found it. The faint, almost imperceptible etching on the inner band. With the last vestiges of her strength, she pressed her thumbnail against it, a desperate, defiant act. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the ring, followed by a deafening crack that reverberated through the room. The sapphire shattered, exploding into 1,000 glittering shards that rained down like deadly confetti. The golden band, once so solid and ancient, crumbled to dust in her hand, leaving behind only a faint imprint on her skin. The coldness vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming warmth that flooded Sarah's body. She gasped, drawing a deep, cleansing breath, as if awakening from a long, terrifying dream. Her vision cleared, the colors of the room returning to their vibrant hues. The exhaustion lifted, replaced by a jolt of renewed energy. She looked at her hand, now free of the cursed ring, and then at David, who stood staring at the scattered dust and sapphire shards. His face a mixture of shock and profound awe. The air in the room, once thick with tension, felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. But the silence that followed was not one of peace, but of stunned disbelief. The curse, centuries old, had been broken. But at what cost? And what would become of David, of his lineage, now that the binding had been severed? The illusion of happiness had been shattered, replaced by a brutal, life-altering truth. Sarah was alive, but irrevocably changed. The struggle was over, but the aftermath, the profound implications of what had just transpired, had only just begun to unfold. The final chapter of this terrifying tale was yet to be written. The silence that followed the ring's shattering was profound, a vacuum created by the sudden absence of an ancient, malevolent force. Sarah stood, trembling, her hand no longer weighted by the cursed gold and sapphire, but by the sheer, overwhelming reality of what had just transpired. The battle was over, the immediate threat gone, but the reverberations of centuries of suffering, of twisted love and forced sacrifice, still hung heavy in the air. Her eyes met David's, and in their depths, she saw not just shock, but a dawning realization, a quiet terror that transcended his previous resignation. "It's broken," David whispered, his voice hoarse, disbelieving, as he looked at the shimmering dust and scattered sapphire shards on the floor. His composure, once so unervingly calm, had completely fractured, replaced by a raw vulnerability Sarah had never witnessed. He dropped to his knees, running his fingers through the remnants of what had once been the very core of his family's cursed existence. A single tear tracked a path down his cheek, a stark contrast to the collected demeanor he had maintained throughout their horrifying revelation. It was a tear not of grief for the lost artifact, but perhaps of a crushing fear for a future now unwritten, a destiny he no longer understood. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline, followed by a wave of profound fatigue. The energy that had allowed her to break the curse was now ebbing, leaving her physically drained but mentally alert. She looked at her left hand, the faint red mark where the ring had been, a stark reminder of the nightmare she had just escaped. The terror was replaced by a strange sense of quiet emptiness, a void where her trust and her dreams had once been. What happens now, David?" she asked, her voice weary. "What happens to you? To your family? You said defying it was worse." The relief of her own survival was inextricably intertwined with a gnawing uncertainty about his fate. He had, after all, been her husband, however complicit he was in her intended demise. David slowly rose, his shoulders slumped. "The pact? It was two-sided," he explained, his gaze distant, as if seeing beyond the walls of their home, into the depths of his family's tormented history. The power, the prosperity in exchange for the lives. Now that the tribute has been severed, the balance is broken. The Eldoria line, it will wither, not with the suddenness that the curse brought to its victims, but a slow, inevitable decline. Disease, misfortune, barrenness, generations of prosperity, undone by a single, desperate act of defiance. He looked at her then, his blue eyes filled with a complex mixture of gratitude, fear, and a deep, aching sadness. "You saved yourself, Sarah, but you also broke my family." His words struck Sarah like a physical blow. She had fought for her life, for her very soul, and she had won. But her victory came at a devastating price for the man she had loved, and for his entire lineage. The moral implications were staggering. Was her life worth the destruction of an entire family, however tainted their prosperity? The ancient curse had been a monstrous entity, but it had also, in its own twisted way, sustained David's line for centuries. Now that sustenance was gone. Over the next few weeks, the truth of David's words began to manifest in subtle, then undeniable ways. The Eldoria family's vast network of businesses, once seemingly invincible, began to experience inexplicable setbacks. Investments failed, partnerships dissolved, and a pervasive sense of ill fortune seemed to cling to their every endeavor. Family members, once robust and vibrant, complained of chronic fatigue, unexplained ailments, and a general malaise that defied medical explanation. The vibrant, almost luminous quality that had always surrounded David and his kin, a subtle aura of prosperity and vitality, slowly faded, replaced by a pallor, a subtle dimming of their once bright spark. Sarah witnessed it firsthand, the gradual decay of a legacy built on stolen life. Their marriage, of course, was over. The foundation of love and trust had been utterly pulverized by the revelation of the curse. How could she ever truly trust him again, knowing he had knowingly led her to such a fate, even if he claimed to be a prisoner of his own lineage? The intimacy, the laughter, the shared dreams, all irrevocably poisoned by the shadow of the cursed ring. They spoke little, their conversations strained and filled with unspoken accusations and profound grief. David, for his part, seemed consumed by the unraveling of his family's fate, a silent, resigned acceptance of their collective doom. He bore no malice towards Sarah. Perhaps, in a twisted way, he even found a morbid sense of peace in the destruction of the curse, even if it meant the end of his own line. Sarah moved out, severing ties with the Eldoria family and the haunting past they represented. She needed space, time to heal, to process the trauma she had endured. The nightmares lingered for months, though now they were less about her own impending doom and more about the faces of the past brides, their silent screams echoing in her mind. She sought therapy, slowly, painstakingly peeling back the layers of fear and betrayal, trying to rebuild a sense of self that had been irrevocably altered. The experience left an indelible mark on Sarah. She was no longer the optimistic, trusting woman who had walked down the aisle with David. A profound wisdom had settled in her eyes, a deep understanding of the hidden darkness that can lurk beneath the most beautiful facades. She learned to trust her instincts, to listen to the whispers of unease that had once tried to warn her. She became fiercely independent, cautious of grand gestures and promises that seemed too perfect. She traveled, immersing herself in new cultures, seeking to understand the ancient beliefs and forgotten magic that had almost claimed her life. She never remarried, the memory of the cursed ring a silent, constant reminder of the perils of unconditional trust. Years passed. Sarah built a new life, one free from the shadows of the Eldoria curse. She found purpose in helping others, sharing her story cautiously, perhaps inspiring those who felt trapped by their own unseen burdens. The Eldoria family, true to David's prophecy, slowly faded from prominence. Their once grand estates fell into disrepair, their wealth diminished, their lineage dwindling. They became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones in certain circles, a family whose prosperity had been bought at an unthinkable price, and whose downfall was the bitter fruit of a broken covenant. Sarah sometimes wondered about David. Did he find peace in the end? Did he regret his choices? Or was he truly just a victim of circumstance, caught in a web spun long before his birth? She never sought him out, and he never sought her. Their paths, once inextricably linked by a cursed ring, had diverged into entirely separate destinies. The story of the cursed wedding ring became a somber reminder that even in the purest of intentions, hidden dangers can lie. That love, when blind, can lead to the most unforeseen and devastating consequences. And that freedom, true freedom, often comes with a price, a heavy weight of truth that must be carried, and a legacy of sacrifice that can never truly be forgotten. The echoes of the past, the silent screams of the brides, would always linger, a haunting melody woven into the fabric of Sarah's survival, a testament to the enduring power of both darkness and defiance. Her life was a new chapter, etched with the scars of a battle she never asked for, but ultimately won, a solitary victory against an ancient, relentless evil.